We often think that to change our lives, we need some kind of massive seismic shift, this huge burst of motivation or just pure grinding willpower.
Right. And if you don't feel that big adrenaline rush, you just don't start. You're stuck.
Exactly. And that feeling, that inertia, is precisely what James Clear targets in Atomic Habits.
He basically argues that that belief, the need for huge motivation, is the very thing holding us back.
So what's the alternative?
He says the real engine of change isn't some heroic, dramatic effort. It's the small, almost invisible changes. The atomic habits that just compound over time.
And that idea, the power of the small shift, is why this book has just exploded.
Oh.
So today, we're not just doing a summary.
Yeah.
We're doing an extended analysis. This is all about looking at how the author shapes his argument, how he builds influence, and earns your trust. It really gives you the tools to read with, sharper insight.
So if you're wondering, should I read this book? This will definitely help. And it's also fantastic for any aspiring writers out there.
Absolutely. We're moving beyond the what to the how and the why of its incredible success.
And we'd love to hear from you. If you find this expanded format valuable, where we really get into the rhetoric behind the advice, let us know. Your feedback helps guide what we do next.
Before we jump in, just a quick note. You are experiencing a unique two-host AI conversation powered by Google's Notebook LM for deeper, more dynamic book analysis.
Okay, so to set the stage here, the real strength of Atomic Habits isn't that it's full of brand new, groundbreaking research.
It's not.
Not really. It's more about how Cleary so expertly packages these familiar ideas from behavioral science. He puts them into this framework that is just so accessible, so repeatable. He's a master curator.
So who is this for then? Who is he really talking to?
Well, the main audience is the general reader who wants self-improvement, the person who's just frustrated with failed New Year's resolutions and wants a practical step-by-step guide.
Someone who's tired of being told to just try harder.
Precisely. And then there's a second audience, which is just as important. Managers, coaches, teachers, people who need a simple framework they can give to their teams.
And his goal, his purpose, is to completely reorient your thinking right from the start, to get you away from goals and discipline.
Yes. His whole purpose is to persuade you that focusing on systems, not goals, and making these tiny atomic adjustments, that's the most effective path. He wants you to stop seeing habit change as just an outcome and start seeing it as a shift in your identity.
Okay, let's start with that foundation, the pure logic, the logos of it all. What is the conceptual skeleton holding this whole argument together?
The book's dominant appeal is absolutely logos. It's all built around one clear model, the habit loop.
The habit loop.
Clear argues that all behavior, good or bad, follows this logical four-step process: cue, then craving, then response, and finally, reward.
And that's not a new idea, is it?
No, it's not groundbreaking science, but framing it as this predictable four-step loop makes something that feels very complex suddenly feel manageable.
So the logic is, understand the loop, and then you have a prescription to change each step of it.
Exactly. He immediately converts that loop into the very actionable, very memorable 4 laws of behavior change.
And calling them laws is such a powerful choice.
It is. That confident, instructional tone is a massive, persuasive lever. It's not 4 tips, it's 4 laws. It tells the reader these steps are predictable, they're almost scientific, and therefore they're proven to work.
But let's be critical for a second. Aren't the 4 laws make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, make it satisfying? Aren't they just common sense, really? How does framing them as laws actually make the argument stronger?
That is a great question, and it really gets to the power of organization and naming. Common sense is often vague.
Right.
And vague advice just leads to vague results. Clear's genius is taking that general wisdom like make things easier for yourself and turning it into a precise, systematic framework that you can actually remember when you're stressed or tired. He moves us from I should to here's how.
Okay, so give us an example. How does one of those laws provide the precision that, say, common sense just lacks?
Let's take the third law, make it easy. This is where the book provides so much tactical value. It gives you these immediate, low-friction ways to start.
Like the 2-minute rule.
Exactly, the 2-minute rule. It says any new habit has to be simplified so it takes less than 2 minutes. If you want to become a runner, the new habit isn't running 5 miles. It's just putting on your running shoes.
So it's designed to completely bypass that initial need for motivation. You don't need willpower for a 2-minute action.
Correct. Or think about habit stacking. That helps with the first law, make it obvious. Instead of just saying, oh, I should meditate more, the system forces you to be precise. You say, after I pour my coffee, which is my current habit, I will meditate for 1 minute.
You're tethering the new action to an old one, so the cue becomes automatic.
Yes. And the book's structure just drills this in chapter after chapter. State a principle, back it up with a story or a study, and then give you concrete tactics.
Okay, that brings us right to credibility. The system can be logical, but you have to trust the person selling it to you. How does he build that credibility, his ethos?
He builds a really powerful dual ethos. First, he's the expert. He grounds every single principle in behavioral science, neuroscience, citing research. This positions him as this reliable, data-driven guide. But that's only half of it.
The second half has to be the personal experience, right? Academic research alone doesn't usually create a bestseller like this.
That's the practitioner element, and it is absolutely critical. He talks about his own struggles, his own experiments. He anchors his authority not just in what he's read, but in what he's lived through.
And he has that one incredible story.
The baseball accident.
Yeah.
Yes. He details this horrific high school injury where a bat hit him in the face, left him with multiple fractures. It's a foundational piece of his credibility.
It's a really vulnerable thing to share.
It is, and it's not just filler. It shows you, the reader, that he didn't start from some place of perfect discipline. He had to literally rebuild his life from a terrible starting point, using the very systems he's now teaching. It transforms him from a theorist into a survivor.
And that generates so much trust.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's how he builds credibility. Let's talk about the emotional appeal, the pathos.
Yeah.
How does the book tap into that deep-seated hope for change?
He uses these framing devices that are specifically designed to create a really powerful, accessible kind of hope. The most potent one is the metaphor he uses again and again.
I know this one.
Defining habits as the compound interest of self-improvement.
It sounds so simple, but that phrase is just loaded with emotional power.
Yeah.
Why do you think that financial metaphor works so well?
Because it completely reframes the idea of effort. It promises you that these tiny, almost unnoticeable daily wins will inevitably snowball into huge, meaningful change. It takes the pressure off.
So if you miss a day, it's not a catastrophic failure.
It's just a missed deposit. The belief is that your results get multiplied over time, and that replaces the anxiety of self-improvement with the quiet confidence of just patient investment.
And that ties right into his idea about identity, that every action is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. It gives every tiny action this huge significance.
Exactly. You are voting for your future self with every small choice you make. It's a brilliant reframe.
If you value this blend of analytical depth and practical knowledge, check out Mindful Moments, our YouTube channel, offering AI book analysis, summaries, and critiques. It's all designed to inspire reflection and rational thought.
Okay, so let's get into the architecture of influence. The book has this clear, system-driven argument. What are the rhetorical choices that make this framework so memorable, so sticky?
It really seems to come down to his choice of words and just constant reinforcement.
Absolutely. We've talked about atomic and compound interest, but the big rhetorical shift is framing everything as systems versus goals.
Right, goals are a finish line.
And they're fleeting. A system, on the other hand, is a continuous process. By defining success as maintaining the process, not just hitting a target, he gives you a framework that is built for the long term. It's adaptable.
And the structure of the book itself feels so deliberate, like it was designed for you to remember it.
It's entirely pedagogical. He restates the laws constantly. He inverts them for breaking bad habits, make it invisible, unattractive, difficult, unsatisfying. A repetition is a conscious rhetorical choice to make the framework easy to recall and apply long after you've finished reading.
The framework itself becomes the anchor. And that's the classic self-help move, isn't it? Giving people those memorable, brandable tools.
He executes it perfectly. He gives you these tactile tools that are immediately shareable. When you have a named framework, clear laws, and these tactical moves like habit stacking or the 2-minute rule, you create these anchors for readers.
And then people can talk about them. They can tell their family or their coworkers about the 2-minute rule.
Which is social reinforcement, and it just broadens the book's cultural reach.
You know, I also found the way he alternates between examples really effective. He'll talk about elite athletes 1 minute and then just everyday snacking the next.
That mix is so important for mass appeal. He'll talk about the British cycling team, and then he'll talk about how you can use the exact same laws to stop eating junk food at night. It makes the principles feel both aspirational and totally accessible.
So we've laid out all the rhetorical strengths. What does this mean for someone reading it critically? Where's the framework strongest, and where does it maybe raise some important questions?
Its greatest strength, as we've said, is that reframing around identity. The focus on environment design and identity shifts habit change from being a contest of willpower into a holistic, long-term project.
But that same streamlining that makes it so accessible, it must simplify things, right?
It has to.
Yeah.
For an academic reader, some of the explanations can feel a bit thin. He'll reference neuroscience, but at a very high level, more to support a principle than to have a deep debate about it.
So if you're looking for a detailed literature review, this isn't it.
No, and I think the bigger question is about applying these laws in genuinely difficult circumstances. If the law is make it easy, and the advice is to design your environment, what happens if you have no control over your environment?
That is the major critical insight, isn't it?
It is. The book really operates on an assumption of baseline agency and stable resources. The very upbeat, system solve everything tone can kind of understate the massive structural or psychological barriers that really complicate things.
For example, someone dealing with a chronic illness, where the energy just to make it easy is 10 times higher than for a healthy person.
Exactly. Or someone experiencing deep poverty or trauma. When you're fighting those things, environment design is not a simple choice. Access to safe time, safe space, the money to make things easy, that's a luxury.
So the principles are still logical, but the barrier to entry is just understated for some audiences.
It is. It limits the book's persuasive reach for those who might need it most. And it forces a critical reader to remember that while the systems might be universal, our resources definitely are not.
That's a really key distinction.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the final thought we should leave our listener with, building on this idea of environment design?
Well, if habit formation is truly about identity and environment, as the book persuasively argues, then the question for all of us is this. How much of your current environment is genuinely designed by you based on the person you want to become? And how much of it is just inherited or accidental or even imposed on you by others?
And the real work begins when you start consciously answering that question.
That's where it all starts.
That is a powerful place to end. We've covered the rhetorical success of atomic habits, from the logic of the 4 laws to the expert and practitioner ethos, and that powerful pathos of the compound interest metaphor. It's a masterful piece of persuasion and instruction, and we hope this analysis has sharpened your own reading.
Click the link on screen for the in-depth book summary. Subscribe, share, purchase via link, and think rationally.
See the many genre-based book podcasts at Mindful Moments. Subscribe and nourish your mind on the go.